We've had these 2 storms, and it has changed our real estate market in both the short term, the long term, and you're going to see a lot of changes in neighborhoods that are coastal, that are in flood areas, that have 1-story single-family homes. So what I want to talk about next is what's called the 50% rule. So if you are listening to this show right now and you have storm damage and you're going through the process of deciding whether or not to renovate your home, whether it can be renovated, or whether or not you're looking to sell the property, we obviously always help with that. If you're looking to sell, you want a cash offer from an investor, you can do that at duncanduo.com. You can get a free home value estimate. We can help you sell it traditionally. We can help you take whichever path that you want to take down the path of selling your home at duncanduo.com. But there's a thing called a 50% rule from FEMA. If you're in a flood zone, FEMA, as well as the local municipalities, have a rule that if you are going to renovate a property, that you can't renovate it more than 50% of the structure's value. So I'll give you an example. The reason for that is because FEMA doesn't want to keep rebuilding homes and have them flood over and over and over again. So they want to build structures that are less likely to have massive damage. So single-story, 1-story homes in a lot of these flooded out areas are going to have a hard time getting rebuilt, and here is why. They're going to have a hard time getting permits. It's going to force a lot of people to sell their homes, either to sell them as land, so a 2-story structure that's more elevated can be built that can navigate around FEMA's rules and get it to a higher floodplain so it's not as likely to flood and have damage. This 50% rule exists, and what it says, again, is that you can't spend more than 50% renovating or rebuilding a home than the structure's value. So an example, say you have a $500,000 property. The land's worth $200,000, the house is worth $300,000, and you have a quote for $200,000 to fix up your $300,000 house. In that instance, you'd be above the 50% rule, and you would have a hard time getting a permit, and frankly, might not be able to rebuild or renovate your house. So FEMA, if you go around the country to areas where a massive flooding has happened from hurricanes or massive damage, you'll notice that a lot of the old single-story homes that used to exist ended up getting torn down, and 2-story structures or 3-story structures got built in their place because those were more, safe from flood damage, because FEMA doesn't want to keep paying out claims over and over again on the same properties. So they have this rule, to basically say, you're not going to renovate this home, you're not going to get a permit, you're not going to get okayed, or you're going to violate the FEMA rule, you're going to have insurance problems. So nonetheless, that rule exists to protect FEMA from, paying out again and again on the same properties, but also to try and make neighborhoods safer for flooding. So when you drive around South Tampa or Shore Acres or some of the coastal areas, or even, look, it's even stuff in the burbs and Zephyr Hills and some areas close to rivers and ponds that flooded really bad or flood continually, FEMA wants 2-structure stories to be built. So they put this rule in place so that people couldn't rebuild. They would have to get their insurance payout and sell their property for land and then kind of move on. That's basically what it is. It's not 50% of the value of the whole property, okay? I want that to be clear. It's 50% of the value of the structure, right? So if you have a $800,000 house and your lot's worth $300,000 and your house is worth $500,000, then it's different. Then you have more. You have a higher dollar amount that you can renovate. There are a couple of easy ways to find that number. People will say, well, hey, how do I figure out what the value of the structure is? You can certainly get a private party appraisal and then subtract the land value or vacant land and try and argue that way. All of the counties also have structure value on the property appraiser website. So you can go onto the Pinellas County property appraiser website for your property, and there is a drop down with a FEMA, building value that the county has determined. Now, that doesn't mean the county's always right. We know the county assesses stuff wrong sometimes in Pinellas County. They do the same in Hillsborough. That's why you have a process where you can dispute it. Or you can get your own private party appraisal to determine the structure value of the property to support you rebuilding it. But I believe that there are some consumers out there that are doing stuff without permits and are probably approaching or nearly approaching that 50% rule, and they're going to end up having problems with insurance, problems with inspections, problems with permitting. It's the one downside of the people that want to rebuild their structure very quickly and do some of the stuff themselves or hire it out and then go after insurance later, is that you may end up putting yourself in a position that you've got a house that you rebuilt, but it's not insurable because it wasn't permitted and your renovations exceeded the FEMA rule. So be very cautious right now. I know everyone wants to get their house back to normal. I know people want to get their lives back to normal, but there are definitely some people making mistakes, hiring their own contractors and doing their own repairs that are going to push that number and are going to have obstacles insuring their property, or they're doing stuff without permit. And look, I'm the first person to say that I don't love how the process works for some of the permitting that's happening right now and that was happening before the storms. I think all the counties locally require permits on some stuff that makes absolutely no sense to require a permit on, but guess what? That's tax dollars. So they got to get their tax dollars somehow because we don't have a state income tax. Nonetheless, the permit police are out, going through neighborhoods. They're looking for things that you're doing that you're not supposed to do. And if you do stuff without permit, you may end up having to tear it out. So just be cautious. I know you want to get your house back in order. I know you want to get your life back to normal. I know you want to repair your house, but you may be doing things, that are going to inhibit your ability to sell the home later or inhibit your ability to get insurance or permitting on the property. So just be cautious about that as you navigate around the 50% rule.